Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dragonfly Discussions podcast. Today is December 2025. I hope that number one in the guest is Rhonda. Hello, Rhonda. It was funny. I was just sitting on my couch and I'm like, oh, I think it's time for me to podcast. And the spirit moved me. And so here I am. So we are going to read again the safe space reminders, and then we will finish chapter 4. Welcome to my podcast, Dragonfly Discussions. You are welcome to enter your name and location you are from. I am thrilled you are listening, and I hope you enjoy this session together. Another safe space reminder, please use your own safe space parameters. Amongst the chapters I read, which may arouse emotions or memories of your own, you're welcome to excuse yourself or stay. So don't worry about anybody. Just take care of you, and we will understand. So here we are. We're finishing chapter 4, and I perused through it a little bit to kind of prepare myself. I didn't bring any tissue. I don't know if I'm going to cry or not, but that's okay. So here we are. We are now finishing my journey in my rehab. I've now gone through almost a year and a half in my rehab in Pennsylvania. It started in Fresno, 6 months, and then it took me to Pennsylvania for about a year. And then I spent another 6 months in Chicago. Normally around the cycle of when you enter into the program, you either graduate in October or you graduate in April. There's 2 graduations each year. That's it. And so for me, it took me about 18 months to finish the program. So I'm now finishing. They let you go off the mountain in Pennsylvania and go back to your own hometown. So my family was able to afford me to leave Pennsylvania, fly back to Fresno, California, to visit them for 4 days and take care of a bunch of things and have this wonderful time with my family, and then go back and then finish off the last leg of the program, which was 6 months, wherever you chose. It could be Pennsylvania or it could be any of the intro centers. There was like 4 or 5 intro centers. So, I'm now finishing off with that 4-day pass, and I'm going back through home. I've left my grandma, so I visited my family, my step family, and I visited my grandma, my birth mom side of the family, which is not the most healthiest. And now I'm coming home from all that visitation. So we're on page 160, subchapter Thicker Than Water, and chapter 4. The next morning was beautiful as I woke up early with my grandmother. So this is my grandmother on my birth mom's side in Visalia, and enjoyed the same coffee she used to make me when I was young. And so my grandma would drink coffee from morning till night. She still does. And she would feed me coffee. And so as a young child, and so she would make me the same yummy coffee and just the right amount of milk and sugar. We talked about Leroy and life over coffee. So Leroy was my evil grandfather who passed away. And I had to go through all of that process with him dying and all of that. So we just talked over life, and I could tell my grandmother was very lonely, even though he was a very evil, bad husband. That was all she knew. And she would never speak anything otherwise of him, despite any of the things he did to her. So she told me about her health and losing Leroy. She told me how hard it was when Leroy's mother cut her out of the will because she was planning on using that money to get out of debt. So my grandfather was very evil, and his mother and his father were very evil. and they cut my grandmother out of everything that she should have inherited by being married to Leroy. Leola, my grandfather's mother, just cut her out, which was very, very, very cold. Very cold. Because my grandmother deserved every bit of inheritance that she could get. And my grandmother was very poor. And this was like her one opportunity that could maybe give her something. And Leola, nope. So, anyways, then we went, so me and my grandma in her house. Then we went to talk about other things. So we're like sitting in her living room, and she had like 2 recliner chairs, and the TV's off in the distance, and the kitchen's off in the distance. And we're just chilling next to each other, just sipping our coffee, talking about whatever. And so then we went to talk about other things, such as the times in Exeter. So this is my deep youngest childhood times in Exeter, where it was so fun. It was hard. It was bad in times, but it was interesting. And my grandma and I were like buds. So we start to reminisce about playing in the backyard, or all the times coloring and playing board games together. She and I giggled over all our times together. I loved my grandmother very much and felt so grateful to be sitting in her home, having coffee with her again. Then we got ourselves ready for the church back in Fresno. So yeah, my grandma was the best person in my entire life. She was so fun and vibrant. We played tons of games together when I was young. So we would often reminisce. It was fun. So I packed up my things and headed back to Fresno. I was going to see my good friend Dee Dee again, who ultimately helped me get into New Life for Girls. I was going to see Lois and Gloria, who were Mark's mom and aunt. I was also going to see Mark's friend Chris, who was Dee Dee's husband. He tried to help Mark and me when we were struggling. So that's a whole convoluted relationship package there. So Mark and I, through Mark's, so Mark is my boyfriend at the time when all of this is happening in 2003. No, yeah. Well, it would be 4 or 5. Yeah, it'd be 3-ish. Yeah, it'd be 3-ish. Because, yeah, it took me, no, it would be 2004 or 5-ish, because I entered for around 2005, and then graduated in 2006. So this is around 2005, 4-ish, when we were going to the church and we were with these people. But Dee Dee and Chris were the siblings of a pastor of a church here in Clovis. So Chris's father was the pastor at the time, and great man. And it's over on Clovis. It's still there. And we became friends with Chris and Dee Dee, which they were not much older than us. And they knew that we were struggling. And this was a church that understood recovering people who were struggling with addiction. And it was a Christian church and had a lot of love. So they knew of Mark's addiction, and they knew of my addiction. So they were trying to help us as much as we were trying to want help. So that's Dee Dee and Chris. And then Lois and Gloria are my boyfriend's mom and aunt. So Mark's mom and his mom's sister. So they've been through a lot with Mark. Mark was 16 years my senior, in his 60s already, and a longtime heroin addict, and had already been through prison and everything. And then I come along and I have the same addiction. And so they're all very concerned about us. And so they really, really tried their best here. But we're back with those same people who got us, well, I went into the program. Mark went back to prison, but I went into the program and it helped me. So now it's like full circle, visiting, but Mark's not there. Um, yeah, Mark was not. I was hoping to see Mark. I wouldn't get to see Mark, though, as he was still suffering from addiction and was missing by then. So I only got to see everybody else, but not Mark. But I was excited to return to the church and see the special people in my life. We arrived at the church, and I couldn't wait to get out of the car. My grandmother and I walked in, and instantly Dee Dee recognized me and ran over to hug me. We gave each other the biggest hug that I couldn't recall ever receiving or giving. So it's a long time since I'd really had that kind of an embrace. Then I introduced my grandmother to Dee Dee, and she took us to meet everyone. I was thrilled to see Chris, Lois, and Gloria again. They all looked at me with tears in their eyes, showered me with compliments, telling me how beautiful I looked and how fresh, happy, and clean I looked. Yeah, that was often a compliment. Clean, I looked. Clean. Clean. Yeah. I guess I looked really dirty, which I probably did. It was all very overwhelming. My grandmother and I sat down, and the service began with song and worship. Then the pastor read the message. After the service was over, we all stayed back for a bit. I didn't have much time as I had to get back to my parents' house and prepared to head back to Dover, Pennsylvania. I shared with everyone how much God had truly changed me, and they all knew it. They could see it on my face through my words and actions. They were all at peace and so happy for me. These people really had seen me be like the worst, not the true worst of the worst, but they saw me pretty bad, and they were really happy for me. They told me not to worry about Mark, which I knew, I had to let him go. I told them to ask him to help. Oh, I told them to ask him to get help at Teen Challenge, to share with him, if possible, about the men's program, which was similar to New Life for Girls. They promised me that they would do all they could to help Mark. We all prayed together, asking God to continue to guide me, change me, deliver me, and shine his love upon me in my next journey to Chicago. So Teen Challenge, if you're interested, Teen Challenge does have a women's and a men's program. It is a Christian-based program. I tried it. I think the women's program is in Bakersfield. Yeah, that's the one I was sent to, and I left, coming back to Fresno. But there is a men's program that's successful. So if you are struggling, you can check out Teen Challenge for the guys. It's a good program. It's similar to the New Life for Girls program that I went to. Although now I just drove by the New Life for Girls house. It's so crazy. It's now New Life for Recovery. So it's still there on Broadway, 205. It's probably 205. Probably just Broadway, 205 Broadway. But yeah, it's New Life for Recovery. Okay, so I had to let Mark go. I had to just, suggested he go wherever he needed to go. We all hugged and said our goodbyes as tears streamed down our faces. My grandmother then took me back to my parents' house. In the car, she mentioned how lovely the service was, and I agreed. I looked out the window and again thanked God for such a beautiful blessing of a visit. He just allowed me to see such loving and kind people who ultimately led me to New Life for Girls, thus saving my life in essence. They truly were angels on life. And what I mean by that, had I not met Mark or dated Mark, I would have never met the very people that were members of this church and thus were affiliated with this Christian program, New Life for Girls, who then I entered and then saved my life. So it's kind of like things are tied together more than we realize. I was finally back at the Harrison house. So now I'm back home from that visit because I'm on my 4-day. So I'm done with the Visalia stuff, and now I'm back home in Fresno at my Harrison house, my home that I grew up with, or grew up in with my dad. I was finally back at the Harrison house, my home, and my favorite place to be. My parents greeted us out in the front yard, and I gave them both tight hugs again. We walked in and spent some time with each other. My grandmother didn't stay long and went back to Visalia. I continued my visit with my parents as they began to tell me about their plans next. For dinner, my father was going to barbecue his famous tri-tip again. Tri-tip, my dad made the best tri-tip barbecue. Like, whew, yeah. As that was all our favorite. He made the best tri-tip. Yeah. The rest was going to be similar to my 12-hour pass with the fixings of rice pilaf from my grandmother, and chocolate pie from my grandmother, Elle, and a beautiful salad made by my stepmother, I should say. I couldn't wait for dinner. So my grandma Elle is my step grandma. She's on my step grandma's side of the family. And then a beautiful salad by my stepmother. My grandma Elle, and we're saying L's because we're not releasing all the true names here. My grandma Elle and brother and his wife and daughter Emma were coming, and so was Nathan, my brother's best friend. I asked my parents if I could use the phone to call my best friend Milani, and they said that I didn't need to ask. So this was back when you still had phones at the house, like literally phones, like dial cordless even, or you asked to use somebody's cell phone, which that was very rare. This was in the early 2000s, 2006 ish. So, and in my family, I don't know, that was customary. We asked to use the phone. That was kind of like what I was brought up with. So, if that seems odd, that's what I grew up with. And then also, too, I had learned in the program we couldn't use the phone. So you had to ask for permission. So you lost that real feeling of just being able to pick up the phone and just call and do whatever you wanted. You had to ask for permission. Like, so I asked my own family for permission to call out. And I just wanted to reach my best friend, Milani. So I called Milani and we talked for hours. She was so excited and over the moon of my success. I was elated to have the opportunity to speak with her and our friendship still be the same as it was always. I apologized to her and owned up to my wrongs. As always, she forgave me and told me how much she loved me. She said, "My shy is back." And I told her, "Yes, I am." We promised to see each other for Christmas after our return home in late October. So this is like just before all of that. It's probably around April. It's probably around April time when I saw her. The night could have lasted forever for all I cared, as I sat back on the couch next to my father, leaning into his side with his arm around me. During those 4 days, my father and I spent as much time together as possible. It was almost like we hung on to each other and didn't want to let each other go, holding on to every precious second that we had together. My father was very proud of me. And when I sat next to him on my final night, I could literally feel his smile radiate into my body. It filled me with a sense of happiness as if I, being sober, was a long answered prayer for him. My stepmother, came into the room and we began to discuss plans for after Chicago. So we're already starting to plan for after Chicago is going to be 6 months of leadership, or 3 to 6 months, and then I'm going to graduate and then come home. So now we're already starting to plan that far ahead. But I was open to coming home and staying with my grandmother in Visalia. I knew I needed to get a job first, then work on getting my license back, and possibly even go back to school. There was a lot to think about in the months ahead of me. In the late evening hours, I was driven to the airport by my parents so I could head back to Dover, Pennsylvania. I didn't want to leave them, but I knew I had to get back to finish what was started in me and complete the program. We said our goodbyes, cried, and hugged for not long enough. I walked into the airport, turning around one last time to look at my wonderful and gracious parents, waving and yelling, "I'll see you soon." They waved back at me, and I went with tears streaming down my face. I quickly got myself together and found my way to the counter to check in. I passed through security, sat down, and took a deep breath. I cried a little more and asked God to carry me onto my next adventure, Chicago. I was excited to get back to Dover, but I was more excited to get to Chicago, Illinois. I really was. I was so excited to get to a new place in Chicago. I began to think about what life was going to be like as a real staff member, a teacher, cook, counselor, and an example of Jesus to women coming off the streets that were addicted, abused, hurt, and unloved. How was I going to do the task ahead of me? It was vital for me to lead God's sheep in the right way. I took the next challenge as a significant one. And so I don't worship Jesus by any means. I look at Jesus as like a really cool dude who was totally into social justice and stood up for people who were the downtrodden and was outspoken. But Jesus never wanted to be memorialized, idolized. He was against idolatry. And so when I say that as an example of Jesus, I mean, Jesus was so loving. He was encompassing. He welcomed everyone. He was excited for your ideas, new ideas. Whoever you are, you were welcome at the table, kind of thing. And I was excited to be an example of that, which my belief is God. So Jesus, if you follow the Bible, and study the Bible, Jesus was given to us as an example of God. So Jesus was given to us as a human flesh version of God, right? So if Jesus is God, then we don't need to worship Jesus. We can just know that what God wants is who Jesus exemplified. So, it was that's my whole thing about my spirituality is I'm not very Jesus preachy. He was a cool social justice dude, but I don't worship Jesus. I don't really worship really anything, but I appreciate and follow God because God is the one that put Jesus on this planet as an example of him for us to follow. So we could go on a tangent on that. But anyways, that's what I mean by that, as an example of Jesus to women, as somebody who was loving, accepting, just really loving, just really loving. All right. So I took the next challenge as a significant one. So here I am now, in another role that's a bigger responsibility, and these girls that are going to be coming straight off the streets, like kicking drugs, coming off with withdrawals, the whole 9 yards, like I was. So here we go, Chicago, Illinois. Okay, so we are page 164. Hello, Chicago. Before I knew it, I was waking up in Dover, Pennsylvania. So this is when I come back home after my 4-day. Sorry, my nose is running. I headed to bed and began my strict schedule the very next day. It was just 4 days till graduation in April. So I had gone on my 4-day, and then now I got to get right back into the schedule that I had being a staff member in Dover, and then getting ready for the April graduation where everything's going to happen and all these intros are going to be there and all these girls are going to be graduated. And then I'm going to be going off into the bus off to Chicago because the intro center has already accepted me to Chicago. And I now know my future path for the next 6 months till October graduation, because the graduations are only 2 times a year, April and October each year. So till graduation in April, which meant the Chicago directors would come and take me to their intro center. I couldn't wait for the day to come. The days leading up to that day, I spent packing all my things. The program had 2 graduations, one in April and one in October. My entrance into the program led to me to graduate in October. So depending on your cycle, when you come into the program, might force you to graduate a little later. It's just kind of weird. It's fluid. But you typically will meet one of the 2 graduations. You might have to wait. You might fit it perfectly, but April and October. My entrance into the program led me to graduate in October, while the other ladies entered at other times, which led them to graduate in April. Soon the April graduation came, and I was introduced to the directors of the Chicago Intro Center. They were delighted to meet me and welcomed me into their center as a staff member. I was grateful for the opportunity to work for them in their center. The graduation ceremony took place, and I left that night with them in a van with another girl, Jennifer. She was also going to be a staff member there with me. So there were other girls in different stages and might join in on the bandwagon. And so Jennifer was a little bit ahead of me, not too much, but she had been through the program twice. Actually, this was her second time through. So her and I ended up going together. She was going to be a staff member there with me. It seemed like we drove forever as we crossed Ohio, Indiana, and then into Illinois. We drove all night, and as we approached Chicago, the sun was rising on the crest of Lake Michigan. It stretched across the water as we entered the city. It was gorgeous, and I was reassured that I had made the right decision to listen to God, leading me to this intro center. So literally, it was the coolest adventure. Like, everybody was all snoozing in the van, and here I am, like, I'm sleeping a little bit, but I'm like, where are we now? And I remember crossing over the states, and I'm like, where are we now? And we were finally like Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and we crossed over 3 states, and we finally got into Chicago. And I'm not kidding. There was this ridge that we came over, and like the mountains and like the sun, because it was that time of our travel. We had been traveling all night. So by the time we got into Illinois, the crest of the sun was just coming up, and it was just the most gorgeous sunrise that I had ever seen in this new area. And I was like, okay, this is my confirmation. I'm on the right path. And it was so gorgeous. Chicago was so cool. If you ever get to go to Chicago, it was so cool. All right. Where am I? I lost myself. All right. It stretched across the water as we entered the city. It was gorgeous, and I was reassured that I made the right decision to listen to God, leading me into this intro center. I was excited about what lay ahead of me in the big city, filled with history, skyscrapers, and a beach close to the interest center. Yes, in walking distance, there was the beach. Um, I was in heaven all over again, and I was freer to do things. So, as staff now, you get to go out and you get to go to restaurants. You get to go to the park. You get to go wherever you want. You get to drive their vans. You get to kind of have a lot more freedom and get to do whatever you want and not have any answers. Um, let's see. I was in heaven all over again, and I was freer to do things. Being staff at an interest center meant taking the girls out on adventures, church and their appointments, teaching them lessons in class about the Bible, and helping them memorize scripture. So we had to take them, like we got to drive the vans, we got to take them on appointments. If they needed things, we would do whatever we needed for them. But it was so cool driving around town. Um, it meant talking to the students, loving them, guiding them, and having fun with them. We did have a lot of fun. It also meant being strict when necessary. Yes, we had to enforce bedtime rules, no sneaking out, showers, homework. Um, It also meant being strict when necessary and letting go of the girls when they wanted to leave the program, not forcing them to stay. So, yeah, there would be girls that would come in and we get attached to them, and then they'd leave like a week or 2 or 3 weeks. And we'd be like, no, don't leave. And they would leave, and we're not going to run after them. It meant being a true example of what God could do and how he could truly change, heal, and transform us from drugs and demons. We arrived at the large Victorian house, much like my interest center in Fresno. So in Chicago, there was again this beautiful, 3-story house in Chicago, because all the houses there are all freaking vertical and all compacted in together. And so no driveways. You got a back alley entrance into maybe a driveway, which we had. But the front was just this little gate, and then this staircase, and then maybe a patio, and then seriously 2 floors up. But it was gorgeous, gorgeous house. Gorgeous house. Jennifer and I went to our room, which we shared with 2 other staff members. So we got into this 4-girl room, this large room that was kind of on the 2nd floor, and already 2 other girls are housed there. So now Jennifer and I have to kind of hi, we're now in your space. We're going to be here for a while. Let's make peace. We got situated and fell asleep. And this is in the middle of the night. We come into this house and these girls are interrupted. Everybody's interrupted. And we are so dog tired. So all we do is just put our stuff in and crawl to our beds. I think I was at the top bunk. We both probably were at the top bunk and crashed. So we got situated and fell asleep. That's what that means. We were exhausted from all of the traveling. We were allowed to wake up late the next day and get acquainted with the rules of the house. So usually it's really early wake up, but they allowed us to wake up a little late, which probably was maybe by 9 a.m. You had to wake up still early. You couldn't sleep until 12. We were allowed to wake up late the next day and get acquainted with the rules. We were introduced to the other students, so these students who were new people coming in. We were given the schedule of being a staff, which involved being a teacher, a cook, waking up the girls, timing them in showers, 7-minute showers. That's all we could get in the showers was 7 minutes. That's in the water, 7 minutes. That's it. Examining their chores, grading their homework, and then putting them to bed. So basically, we're like counselors, teachers, staff over new people coming in. All the while, we were to maintain our sanity and relationship with God. It was very tough, to say the least. The girls off the streets were not easy to deal with. They were very rebellious. How I was in intro in Fresno, but I had to love them anyway. I wasn't sure who was helping who. It's very true. Them with me or me with them, because I was still learning and they were teaching me a whole lot and I was teaching them. It was very magical. I pulled from my knowledge of scripture and leaned on God, which always helped. For the next 6 months, my life consisted of being a staff member in the Chicago Intro Center. Jennifer and I, who I came with, made it fun. So we were both California girls, and we're trying to make it the best at this intro center, right? We helped make the months pass by quickly. We often played pranks on each other and went off in the van to the beach. Yeah, Jennifer and I played pranks on each other, and they played a very bad prank on me with cicadas, because the cicadas were out and they put it out on my bed, and oh my God, I think I talk about it, but yeah, we were jokesters. And we would also go off in the van. Like, they gave us permission to drive the van, the missionary van, and we would just take a long time getting back home. We would just go off to the beach and say we got lost. And went off in the van to the beach, where we were free for once. We walked around the pier and put our feet in the water, dreaming about our lives away from New Life for Girls. She was from California, like me, and we often shared stories about the West Coast. So here we are, two West Coast girls on the East Coast, in the ocean water that's completely different than the water in the West Coast, but yet we are just our California selves. We both felt like the West Coast was more beautiful than the East Coast. It totally is. There's nothing like our West Coast. The East Coast, yeah, it's cool. It's cold and it's not as friendly. The West Coast, there's nothing like our West Coast. During our free time, we would ask to go out of the house together. So we started butting up together and being like, let's go out, like, let's go have fun and let's go do things. And I don't know, we were just really, we had a lot of fun. So we always had to ask approval from our higher up staff, I don't know what you call them, the intro leaders of the intro center. So we always had to ask those top dogs permission to do anything. If approved by those people, we would explore the city of Chicago, visiting art museums and stores. We went to Chipotle, Starbucks, or the movies usually. And this would be on foot. We would walk. We would catch the subway. We would learn the bus systems. We would walk. Like, we loved exploring Chicago. Jennifer and I did everything we could possibly to just explore Chicago. It was amazing what we did together. It was cool. We didn't just survive on just the van and the plushes. That was just kind of the ministry. But when we were allowed off site, like on our own, we did everything possible on our own. And we saw things that probably most girls didn't do. So we would do Chipotle. That was when I first tasted Chipotle, was in Chicago. Starbucks. We would go to the movies because there was really cheap, like $1, $2 movies that Jennifer was already aware of. And we were like, let's go. Those were our favorite places to go. We planned our futures together. Jennifer was ahead of me in the program, so like I said, she was a little ahead of me, and had plans to settle down permanently in Chicago at the Intro Center. However, I had open to options and didn't know yet what I was going to do. I want either I went back home, stayed in Chicago, or went somewhere else. So I didn't know if I was going to go back home. I was nervous to come back to Fresno. I didn't know if I could be sober in Fresno. I just still wasn't sure. Chicago was exciting. It was cool. Pennsylvania, I didn't really want to go back to Pennsylvania, or I could just go somewhere else. I didn't know. But I was still deciding. But Jennifer kind of was real more stuck on staying in Chicago than I was. I kind of wanted to go back home because my dad. I wanted to be with my family and my dad. I continued to go to churches all over Chicago and sing for donations for the ministry. I loved it. I worked on forgiving Leroy and Debbie, which Leroy is my wicked grandfather who passed away, and Debbie, who is my wicked birth mother. I was given a lot more freedom to talk on the phone. Therefore, I was allowed to talk to Debbie sometimes. I expressed myself to her when she was out of jail and living with my grandmother. I knew she didn't comprehend or know how to handle such honesty. She never truly apologized to me for the wrongs she had done to me. It was almost like she couldn't face the truth even after so many years together. After so many years. I guess together. The God that she preached about wasn't the same one that I knew. He certainly didn't change her as he changed me. It pained me, but I knew I had to accept that it really wasn't her fault. So I really had to come to some really hard acceptance with her. And just people in general when they don't want to change. It was the fault of what happened to her as a child. And so she projected it on me. I knew I had to keep forgiving her, even if she never apologized to me. I also continued to work on my plans for coming home, as graduation was just 38 days away. I began to get excited and spoke to the director. Together, we called the Fresno Interest Center to see if there was room for me as a staff member, but unfortunately there wasn't. So I tried to go back to the Fresno Interest Center where I started in this whole entire program, but there was no space for me. There was really limited space for staff, and staff often stayed for a long time, using it kind of as a permanent residence when that's not the purpose. It is for you to eventually transition out. But so I couldn't go back to the Fresno intro. So I decided that staying with my grandmother, which is my birth mother's mother, in Visalia was the next best option for me. Later in the evening, I spoke to my grandmother, who was thrilled to have me stay with her. But of course, I would need to get a job, pay rent for a room in her house, stay sober, and work on things that I needed to work on, such as getting my license back and getting off probation. So, of course, there was a lot of stipulations for me to move back into her house, which I was fine with. I remember feeling so grateful and a little fearful at the same time. I didn't think I'd be going straight back into the world so soon. I had hoped to transition from an intro center and then to something else on my own. But I had faith that God was going to keep me in the palm of his mighty hands and would never leave me or forsake me. So yeah, I wasn't really ready to just go back into my grandparents' house. That's kind of what I mean by going back into the world. Normally you go back into an intro center where you're kind of protected and sheltered in a little way. And then you slowly transition back into the world where you are really thrown out there to the wolves and you have a lot of reality check and potential to relapse. So that was scary to me. And that wasn't quite my idea, but that was my only option. So here we are, page 168, The Other Shoe. In my final 2 months leading up to graduation, my stomach and spirit turned over many times. I remember going to a church and being prayed over by Pastor Tim Wah. Oh my gosh, I love Pastor Tim Wah. He's from Hawaii. We're still friends. I would never forget him because he saw straight through me that day. As we were saying goodbye to each other, he grabbed me gently, like just gently, took hold of my abdomen, like just gently, like just kind of took hold of my abdomen, and he prayed over me. He foresaw me writing many books someday, and he saw me doing good things. I told him that I always wanted to write a book and never shared that thought with anyone, really. He smiled at me and hugged me. Confused by the message, yet touched, I took it as a confirmation somehow of a dream of mine coming true someday. Isn't it crazy? It's pretty crazy that I'm here with my book. Yeah. I began to have a desire to become an animal control officer in Visalia, where I was going to be living. So I started having dreams about what I would be profession-wise, and all these different things were coming to my mind as I'm sitting there preparing my future, kind of, in a way, when I get back home. Manifesting, honestly. I began studying how to become an animal control officer, ACO. I was given the liberty to go online and do research. So when you're staff, you have access to all that kind of internet, and secular TV, secular music, secular world. You could go out and explore, like we were out to travel. So you are given, literally, you're given back a chance to be back in the normal world. So I had the opportunity to get on the computer, and honestly, I had not been a part of the internet world much. I was in my drug addiction when the whole internet started to happen in the early 2000s. And then the program took me to like the dark ages. And then I'm coming back and learning the things. And then they let me go onto the internet and search. So I just start searching. And my parents were computer nerds. So I'd already had this advanced ability, but I started searching. I'm like, I get access to the internet. Anyways, so I was given liberty to go online and do research, and I still love doing research. I will still research anything. Yeah, yeah. It's how you keep your brain working. So I began to dive into the internet and search all about the process. I contacted the local animal shelter in Visalia and asked if I could volunteer there, hoping to become an officer someday. They welcomed me and told me that I needed my PC 832 Basic Laws of Arrest certificate. I told them that I would be in contact sometime in 2007, most likely to get started. So 2007 is when I'm going to be back home after graduating and possibly able to enter into something like this. They said that they look forward to my call. That thrilled me to no end, and I felt God was calling me to do something great. And what greater field than working with animals, creatures I loved most of all. The next day, I was able to speak to my parents and give them the good news about deciding to live in Visalia, as well as how I dreamt about becoming an animal control officer someday. I was so excited. They listened to me and told me that I'd be successful at whatever I did, which made me smile inside. I spoke to my mother mostly as my father was in the background. So this is My dad's now diagnosed with brain cancer. My stepmother's kind of speaking mostly. My dad has now gone through his first surgery, brain surgery, and kind of is not as well coherent or able to talk and all that. So my stepmother is the most one talking with me and relaying all the information between the three of us. Usually they were on the speaker. However, that call became unlike any call in my entire life. My mother informed me that my father was diagnosed with glioblastoma brain cancer and went through brain surgery. So this was before I had even become aware. So now I'm just becoming aware that my dad has brain cancer. Sorry, my mistake. So my stepmother informed me that my father was diagnosed with glioblastoma brain cancer and went through brain surgery. Shock soon came over my entire body as what I was hearing. I listened to my mother explain to me what happened. She said she came home from work and went to pet. She said he came home, my dad, he came home from work and went to pet the cat one day when suddenly he sneezed and a rush filled his head and he couldn't speak. He said he grew frantic but drove himself to the hospital. He was immediately admitted to the emergency room where they began to run every test and scan possible. She began to explain to me that they found a tumor in his brain and that it was glioblastoma brain cancer. It was a very severe and deadly kind of brain cancer. She told me that the surgery went very well and that my father had some impairment. So, this is crazy. This is crazy to me. Now, I'm in my rehab in Chicago, and they kept a lot of this from me. And my dad apparently purposely wanted me not to be involved, but I'm now suddenly told all of this information, and I'm like, what? Like, my dad's already had this cancer and you've already had brain surgery, and like it was a lot to take in and be so far away across the United States in Chicago, Illinois, so far from my dad, and to learn about what he had just been going through. So it was a lot. It was a lot for me. So she told me that the surgery went very well and that my father had some impairment. So that's why they were on speakerphone and she was mostly talking and he wasn't, because he was just barely recovering from it, from his first surgery, brain surgery. But everything seemed very positive. Then my father got on the phone. He told me in a slurred voice. He told me in a slurred voice not to worry about anything. He apologized that they weren't going to be there to walk me down the aisle at my graduation. So my dad was just worried about me. But there he was. And he said that. I was amazed at his selflessness. His first thought was to apologize for not being able to make it to my graduation. I quickly got myself together, tears rolling down uncontrollably, trying to stay and sound strong on the phone. I told him not to worry about anything and just to focus on his recovery. My stepmother explained that they wanted to tell me sooner, but didn't know how or when would be the right time. Of course, I understood. I confirmed my plans for coming home, and my stepmother told me that she would be there to pick me up. I thanked her, told them both how much I loved them, and hung up the phone. Then I ran up to my room and cried into the pillows for hours on end. That was a really hard thing to swallow. The staff came to check on me and asked me what was wrong. I told them about my father's condition. They all gathered around me to pray for me and my father's situation. They left me alone to cry and work it out with God. For the next few days, I was so numb, but I still had to finish the program. All I wanted to do was run across the country and into my dad's arms, to grab that tumor and yank it out of his head. I wanted to yell at Satan and cry, but I had to be strong for the students and stay strong in faith, as ultimately God was in control. That was so hard. It's 7:57. Hey, we're going to go a little bit over. Page 171, the graduation. This part's a little easier. The last couple of weeks in Chicago went by quickly. I sat there on the porch with just 2 days before I had to graduate at the end of October, looking back at all that I had accomplished and all I had ahead of me. Soon the day arrived where I packed up my belongings and headed to Dover, Pennsylvania. I had made it this far, and I couldn't believe it. I was back in my spot, sitting under the same tree that I sat under all those months in Dover for over a year. So there was this chair that I would sit under the tree. If you've been listening, following, that I would always sit. I returned to that very same spot under the tree, looking out over the vast horizon of beautiful Pennsylvania mountains and the clouds and everything. Over 600 days had passed by in New Life for Girls, and I pondered on it all. The branches were hanging over me, the vast sky before me, and I was in the midst of God's beauty and splendor all around me. It was there where I truly fell in love with God all over again. It really was. I looked back at all that He brought me through, shown me, delivered me from, healed me from, and given me back in return just for surrendering in Him. Tears filled my eyes because it had not been easy. No, it had not. I walked inside, and all the students were thrilled to see me walk inside the building. I received hugs from every girl and staff member. It was quite overwhelming. It was like they knew who I was, and they were all so very happy for me. The night before graduation, I called my parents. My father had got into surgery for the second time, and it was certain that no one from my family was coming to my graduation. So most girls had somebody coming, their family coming to walk them down the aisle of graduation or be there in support. And I had hoped, but it quickly was becoming apparent that nobody was coming because my dad was having brain cancer. He was second surgery. So the directors from Chicago decided to be my spiritual parents, like the spiritual parents to walk me down. Were my spiritual parents and walked me down the aisle. Concerned, I told my stepmother, not to worry and that I would see her the next day. I told her I'd do whatever she needed when I got home and that together we would get through it. She thanked me and told me how much she loved me and how proud she was of me, along with my father. I thanked her as well and hung up the phone. With tears in my eyes, I went to the open field, sat down in the same chair as always, and talked to God. I still talk to God. I was filled with so many emotions that I didn't know what to do. There I was about to go back home to a life that I was no longer, sorry, that was no longer how it was a year ago. No longer was my father going to be the same. I sat there for over an hour thinking about what was ahead of me, how strong I needed to be, and how God was the only thing that was going to keep me safe from drugs. I asked him again to continue to be with me and soon felt encouraged in my spirit that he would never leave me. A smile came over my face and I was filled with hope again. I went inside and got ready for graduation. It was a huge event, including worship, awards, certificates, singing, socializing, and eating. Then it all slowly ended, and everyone made their way home. At that moment, it dawned on me. I had officially graduated from New Life for Girls, where I was from February 2005 to October 28, 2006. I was beside myself at what I had accomplished. I couldn't believe that I was done. God revealed who He was and who I was in Him. He showered me with His great love, delivered me from my demons, gave me a deep knowledge of His word, and set me free and gave me back my life. I had hope and confidence that I never thought I would ever have again. I had happiness, joy, and true peace again. I was satisfied and fulfilled. I was alive again and had my family back, most importantly. I was all of the promises and visions He showed me in those days in jail. And if you have been following, I had very strong impressions and visions of who I would become when I was arrested for the last time in 2005 if I just surrendered to Him. He showed me that I was going to go places and become things, and I was now those things in fruition. As I sat there at the airport, anxiously waiting to see my father, I felt scriptures come alive inside of me. The last plane was about to board, and I was full of wonder of what awaited me. I was so different, and the world seemed strange to me. However, it was not me that lives, but Him inside of me. I knew God would keep me as long as I was willing to be kept. I have to remain in His presence and continue to delight in Him always, to seek Him first, and He will do the rest. I have to rely on Him and walk under His wing. I knew I would face many trials, but with Him by my side, I will surely get through all of them. I have to endure because He endured for me. And this is a little bit of twisted scripture that I'm doing here, if you're not catching on. I have to remember that I can do all the things through Him. The battle belongs to Him. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. That greater He is in me than is in the world. I have to remember that He will never leave me nor forsake me. To resist the devil and he would flee. To draw near to God and He will draw near to me. To commit my way to Him and He will direct my path. I will continue to lean not on my own understanding, but to acknowledge Him and to abide by Him. I will believe that I have a future and a hope, that all things are possible with God, because all I need is faith the size of a mustard seed. A mustard seed is very, very tiny if you haven't looked it up. That's all you need is the size of a mustard seed of faith. I will look not at the seen, but at the unseen, to not be moved by my circumstances, that all things work together for good, to cast down every thought that exalts itself above God. I will walk in humility. That is important. Humility, remembering that God is all powerful, all knowing, and ever present. I will trust that nothing could separate me from the love of God, nothing. That I am loved with an everlasting love. I was made in the image of God. Ah, how wonderful is that? That I have the mind of God and the all authority over Satan. Amen to that. And that demon my book talks about, yeah. I am truly the vision. So that's all scripture right there. That was all things that I had learned from scripture. I had never known the Bible ever so passionately, but those are very key scriptures that I pulled all together and synopsed it into like this beautiful paragraph of strength and standing upon the word of God. And like, people really love the Bible and God bless them and everything, but the Bible is really just a book. It's just a book, and it has a really great bunch of messages in it and a really bunch of great teachings and lessons in it. It's not something to be, I think, worshipped or whatnot, but it's just like this, just like we read any kind of book. My book, it's got lessons in it. You can learn from it, but you don't have to worship my book. I don't want you to worship my book. Please don't worship my book, but learn from it. That's what the Bible is from. Somebody said the basic instructions before leaving earth, Bible, basic instructions before leaving earth. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's really beautiful in a lot of ways. So that's what that whole part was, which I really loved how that turned out from 172 and 173, because that really meant a lot to me to write that. So here we are ending. I know we're just a little bit past, so bear with me. So here we are ending page 174. We're ending chapter 4. I am truly the vision I was given on that day when I returned to my jail cell and imagined surrendering to the program ahead of me. I was radiating. I was free, and the chains of drugs were broken. It was almost too overwhelming. I wanted to share it all with the people sitting next to me. So this is in the airport, and I'm just like having this epiphany and this wonderful experience, right? And I'm just like, I want to tell the world how good I feel. I wanted to share it with all the people sitting next to me. Like I said, I was so grateful to be where I was and who I was again. That little girl who made it, and I was so very proud of her. All right. So that is it. We are now going to enter chapter 5 for the next 2 Tuesdays. And then we're going to have a end of the year reflection of 2025 of what we are most reflective on and what we want to talk about. So please message me if you haven't already. Message me on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, however you want to get a hold of me. But please give me your thoughts so that we can share them together on December 30th. So thank you. That was very fun. I'm glad we finished chapter 4. Chapter 5 is very interesting too. Just stay tuned. We got 2 more chapters, 5, 6, and 7, I guess 3. And then we'll be done. And then the conclusion. So good night, y'all. Thank you for staying with me a little late.